Starting the recording right now. So welcome to all of you. This session is going to be about your interview, making sure that you understand what this process is. I'm going to take you through the process so you understand it. Then I'm going to show you an example of what one of my former students put together in terms of her response to this interview process, so you get a sense of what that is, because that, I think, will help you quite a bit. So what we're going to look at right now is this concept again, and you've seen this one several times, is again the sense of awareness that you have is so important within a system. The quality of your awareness, and we've looked through that, in the past, that's important to you as a leader, but it's also important for you to nurture and develop that in people in your organization. And if you're a classroom teacher, it's important to get kids to begin to understand how they're aware of the environment in which you are creating within the classroom or the learning space. So again, from a leadership point of view, it impacts your actions particularly. So as you think about where you're coming from, based upon Scharmer's points of view of awareness, really, as he says, is that that leadership really doesn't depend on what we do or how we do it, but it's my source, my inner place from where I'm operating from. So one of the purposes of this interview process is to get you to learn how to have a leader who you're interviewing to kind of see if you can get them to expose that inner place from where they operate from. And that is not an easy task to do, because what you're going to be dealing with as you do that is your own inner place, and learning how to turn off the voice inside of your head that is, as it listens to when someone is talking, is already formulating opinions and ideas about how you want to react to what you're hearing. So if you, again, go back to Chris Argyris's ladder of inference, that's where that begins to play out. Or there's concepts from Peter Senge's in terms of the mental models. So these things are important for you to really grasp as you think about the development of your own leadership. But then again, as researchers, as you begin to develop your researching style of who you are, your source as a researcher, your ability to listen is very critical. So that's basically what we're moving into. So looking at this again from these different levels, as you look at this concept that Scharmer talks about, the idea of downloading. And again, this is kind of speaking from, what we do on a daily routine, the polite routines, what goes on in the office, what happens. And what he calls this is the autistic system, not saying what you think. The reason he calls that is because if you know what autism is, basically, as it starts in early childhood, it's the inability to form relationships or to interact within your environment, and particularly around using words. So he borrows that term, and basically, generally, when you're speaking from this point of view, you're really telling people what they want to hear, as opposed to really what they should hear. So that level of downloading is very important. And again, that is I in me. I'm talking nice, I don't rock the boat, etc. The next level then, as you look at this, as he calls is debate, and that's really talking tough, speaking from what I think. It's divergent, it's my point of view. And really, it is an adaptive system, because when you debate, you're trying to get the person to buy into what you're saying. And, you know, the question here is generally with debate, there's winners and losers. So my idea wins out. I don't care what your point of view is, my idea wins out. And so think about debating as how we teach people to debate, and what good debaters do, and how they're able to logically put words together and tear apart the other person's point of view. I don't know if any of you ever taken logic courses and you learn syllogisms and different ways of putting language together. Well, that's what debate is. It's talking tough. It's always coming from my point of view to get you to buy into it. Followed then by that next level is dialogue. And so now what begins to shift here is really seeing myself as part of the whole. So if I'm in a department, mathematics department or a music department, or no matter what it might be, or in a business, I'm in a certain section within that business, maybe the accounting department, what you're really doing here is trying to inquire into different points of view. So as he points out, it's a self-reflective system. And you begin to try to understand what my part is in relationship to the functioning of the whole. And so that's really what reflective inquiry is about. And what you're going to attempt to do when you do this interview is to move at least down to level 3 of dialogue with the individual. So if you've been looking at those 2 handouts I've given you, and you look at the process, you're going to see that what you're going to try to do is get away from 1, get away from 2, but what will be interesting is the person you're interviewing might really keep you at 1 and 2. So, and we'll talk about that, and you'll see in the example from the student where she's talking about that idea. But this is important to kind of get this framework in your mind. And then finally, which maybe, I'm not sure if you'll really get to this level. And this is really through, you know, the idea of what's called presencing, that all of a sudden there's a real shift in the relationship between the person who you're talking to and yourself, and that there's some type of flow that begins to emerge, and that you begin to sense it, and you kind of get this sense of, wow, this is cool to be in this space, and both of you will feel it and know it. Now, and again, we're intellectualizing it right now for you to think about it, because it's something you will feel. Now, I don't know how many of you do meditation, because if you get into a good state of meditation, or even do yoga or any of those things, a lot of times what happens to you when you get into, quote, the zone, that's where you are. And if you're an athlete who's ever worked, you know, on a team or something, and let's say whether it be, you know, football, the relationship between a quarterback and the receiver, or if you're on a basketball, the ability for a point guard to hit that person, there's a flow there. There's a sense of creativity and artistic flow that emerges because it's not, you know, tied into words or anything. It just happens because there's this generative flow. So again, these are, you know, the concepts of what happens when we speak, and these are the types of levels that are extremely important, that if you're going to get to moving eventually up the U to allow the future to come into, you need to go down the U in a way that helps you as the leader to understand where the conversation is at any given time. Now, let me turn my voice off and see if you have any questions or any thoughts about what this says to you. Or examples of it from your own, even today. Did you experience any of this?
We just had a PD on Friday. One of the things that I see a lot in PD is that there's a lot of fake reflective talk. I think it's one of the things that I see, like when you're in these group settings where people feel the need to, maybe I'm doing it right now. That it's like you almost are forced to offer something up in this setting where, oh, I have to say something reflective, and then it becomes this, I don't know. So how do we tell when we're in this interview situation that if the person that we're interviewing is saying something real that we can use in our paper, or if they're saying what they think we want to hear?
Yeah, well, that's good, because that you're going to encounter, I'm going to tell you that right now, you're going to encounter that. Because the person who you're going to be talking to is, you probably, because all you guys have sent me the people, and all the people you've sent me, good, they're good choices. But if you've said to them, I'd like to have an interview with you because I have to do it for class, and I could do this. The question then will be for you to think about, and this is why, if you read the the little manual I gave you, it's why before you do this, you need to quiet your own voice. So you sit for about 15-20 minutes before you even go into the interview, so that you can free yourself of this. Because I'll guarantee you, as soon as you have said to them, I want to interview you, what do you think happens inside of their own heads?
Well, they created an entire script of what they're going to say.
Yeah, probably. Oh, it's an interview. So, okay, now give me the next question. And I've had students say to me, the person said to them, say, okay, what's the next question? Now, if they say that to you, you're definitely not down at level 3. I can tell you right now, you're probably at level 1, because, that's what we're supposed to do, polite routine. Okay, look, I got 20 minutes to do this with you, da-da-da, do. Now, what's going to be interesting, and this will be the challenge I'll throw out to all of you, is how do you get them to move down this? So what you want to look at as you do that, and that's why when you look at those 2 little toolkits I've given you, he has some activities there to get the person into a different type of frame of reference, and we'll look at that in a couple minutes. The other side of that, what you asked is what emerges sometimes when you're in groups, if you said that, is that terminology called groupthink. So everyone's got to think the same. Everyone's got to come. And that's not what you want. You want to be able to, if you notice at dialogue level, it's from defending your point of view to inquiry into viewpoints. So a simple way to do that, I'll tell you, I tell people to do this all the time. If you really want to get that, when someone says something to you about that, say to them, help me understand what you mean by that. Changes the whole dynamics. Now, if you go back, and I think it's in the Sengi book, and I never remember, I don't think you guys had the schools that learned. Some of you might have bought it. But if you go back in the Sengi book, The Necessary Revolution, I think back in there, there's, in the later chapters, I don't remember exact chapters, there's the toolkit for conversation. So go back in and take a look at that. And there's a whole series of terminology that you should use to help get into deeper levels. Okay? Does that help you to at least begin to think about this?
Reba. Come on, sweetie.
So if you hear someone calling for Reba right now, it's my wife calling for the dog.
Reba, come on.
Okay, so let's move on then. So going now to this is, again, the interview looking at this is that if the person's just going to download because you said to them, I have to do this interview for this class. And therefore, if they're downloading, they're going to look at it from just point of view of habits that, okay, yeah, all right, so they're going to ask me a bunch of questions and I'm just going to answer them. So it's reaffirming old opinions and judgments about the process of an interview. So that's what listening from habit comes from. So as you go through this, as you're listening, and because you know these individuals, one of the things you're going to have to work on is not allowing your opinion or judgment about that person to play out while you're trying to listen to them. That's important for you to understand because you're going to be fighting that. Remember, voice of judgment, voice of cynicism, and the voice of fear. You're going to experience what those are if you follow this process. So listening one from habit. Now that listening from the outside is what you begin to do is as you listen to them, you might learn some new things about them that you had no idea. So now what begins to happen is now you start listening from a factual point of view. You begin to notice differences in relationship to how you view them yourself. Because you're going to constantly fight against that. I will guarantee you that right now. And what you're going to need to do is to turn off your voice of judgment particularly. And you'll see this in the example I'm going to give you about that. So that, all right, I'm not gonna come from the opinions I have of this individual, but now, I'm beginning to hear some interesting information, factual information I did not know about them. So now you're at that level 2. Then when you get to level 3, and this is where I'm hoping most of you will at least begin to border on or get there, is empathetic listening, because what will happen is you'll turn off all your opinions or judgments about that individual. You'll listen to some of the factual information because you'll start doing that, but then all of a sudden, you're going to shut all that stuff off, and then you're going to, I really didn't understand that. I really didn't know that about that person. Wow, you begin to get an emotional connection to that individual, which you never had before in relationship to understanding who they are. So that's what empathetic listening. Now what's happening is you're opening up your heart so that you can hear what they're saying. Now, from a pure research point of view, that's very important as a researcher. It's in research language, it's called bracketing, where you turn off level 1 and level 2 so you can listen to the participant who you're gathering data from. And then finally, that last one is now, this is really where you begin to connect to the sense of both of you, like, wow, all of a sudden, questions will just automatically emerge in you to help draw out more of an understanding of who that person is. And you need to allow those questions and go with them. Don't be afraid of them. Don't try to analyze them. Don't try to put any type. If you feel a flow, like as you're listening to that person and something just emerges to find out more about them, you let that happen. Now, I'm going to tell you, it, as they say, it ain't easy. I'll tell you that right now. That is not going to be easy to do. Now, again, you might. I don't know. But what Charmer's saying is that if you're going to get to generative listening, where all of a sudden a new relationship begins to emerge between both of you in understanding what leadership is about and new ways of thinking. That's what happens here. So this is the conceptual framework from which you're working from. And that's why I said to you, I don't want you to do this interview until you kind of process this a little bit and play around with it in your own mind before you start the interview with the individual. Okay? Thoughts, comments? Now,
Yeah, one thought that I have, Dr. Gould, is we do a lot of interviews, at the school. We have a number of people come and go. And, a lot of it has to do with their confidence level and that interaction. There could be some really good teachers come in, but if they can't show us that, within that time, it's hard to take a risk on them to get them hired on for the next 35 years. And, I think it goes both ways as well. Whenever we have everything set up and prepared and scripts pulled together and everybody's on time, really seems to flow a lot better.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is, and I think you're making a distinction there, when you're talking about, there are different types of levels. So if really, when you're interviewing someone, the first go around, you probably want to do it from level 2, where you're trying to get factual information, you're trying to confirm with new data about this person, because obviously when you're doing an interview process, you're working off a resume, you're working off of that. But again, what you're attempting to do is create a space for the possibility of allowing that person, the person's selfness, to emerge. Now, the reason that we're just let that hang out there, because it's interesting. The example I'm going to use or show you was a person who is a human resource person in a school district who interviews all the time. So wait and see what her reflective responses are related to that. Okay? All right. So now the other thing is, what I did there for a little bit, and I didn't do real long, do not interrupt silence. Silence is extremely important in this interview, because what will happen, and I've had students say to me this in the past, is that, yeah, they really tried to do silence, but the person they were interviewing got nervous about the silence. Because the silence is extremely important, because it allows for a activity in terms of open mind, open heart to take place, and allows for that flow to begin to emerge. Silence is very important, but we're generally taught that silence, if you got silence and nothing's going on. And that's a problem, because there's a lot going on when you have silence and you want to nurture it. You don't allow silence to interrupt the process. And what I mean by that is, don't try to stop silence, because it will allow you, from an empathetic point of view, to begin to process what the person is saying, to allow spontaneous emergence of questions that you might want to ask that will lead that person into revealing their source of leadership more. Remember, your task is to understand who they are as a leader, so you can get an understanding of the source of their leadership. Remember, this interview is not about you. The only part this interview is about is for you to practice this type of interviewing technique, which is generally different than what Dave said. For example, when people are coming in, you're interviewing 10 people during a day. Well, our tendency is a lot of times to stay at level 1, because that person you're interviewing, generally, if it's for a job, is automatically in their mind thinking about what you want to hear, not as opposed to observing letting come out who they really are as a teacher or administrator or whatever. Okay? So let that process, think about that. Now I want you to watch this little clip here of Otto. So mute your speakers as you listen to this.
What is that support structure? Well, one is kind of having a practice. And another one that we found many people use, and we, including myself, have found makes a huge difference if you have it, is basically to have a small circle of friends that you get together with once in a while, maybe 2-3 times a year, maybe for a day or something, or a weekend, and where then as a small group, usually it's not more than 5 people, as a small group that, over a dinner or in whatever form, you are not just socializing and, having a good time and exchanging stories, but you're really listening to each other's life's journey and the issues that we each are facing and the evolution and kind of really in the leadership edge that I'm dealing with. So what is leadership edge? It's kind of in my own development. So what is it that I need to let go of? Or what's the old self I need to shed? I need to, let go of. And what is it that I really need to learn? What are the capabilities of what is the space I need to move into more fully? So that, of course, is kind of the deeper challenge that we all have. But what we don't have is a good support structure for that, and kind of having a small group of people who do that with each other. Who apply deep listening to each other. What is deep listening? Deep listening is listening with no judgment, but with full empathy and with an orientation that doesn't pay attention to me where I am, failing and, where I'm failing and basically dying, kind of, or where the old self is dying. So noticing that, but then really paying attention to the other part of myself that is wanting to be born, but that isn't there quite yet. It's maybe a space of possibility I can connect with, and maybe in my best moments I can show up with that. But very often I cannot. And so what can I do to connect that, my best possible future self, my highest future possibility? And it turns out that, so that's really like a birthing process, the other aspect of my emerging self.
So what he's talking about there, and as I was watching this clip, I was thinking about this, that moving forward in your reflective conversation teams, what you should try to do for the remainder of these teams for this course is to start doing deep listening within your team around concepts, talking about the source of your leadership, sharing what you're learning from this interview process, and helping each other to explore what deep listening is about. Okay? So I think that's something, as I was thinking about this more and more, listening to Otto, that really your reflective conversation teams now probably, even though you're looking at the Gallows books and you're looking at the readings there, is to begin to practice the deep listening ideas around the content within Theory U and what you're reading in Gallows, and see if the team itself can get to an empathetic level and possibilities of a generative conversation might emerge over time, over the next basically 5 weeks of the course. So again, he talks about this, and what he calls these a lot of times is called a coaching circle. and that these coaching circles are really designed to help each other to work through, the dynamics of the levels of listening and explore those from your own experiences. So I strongly recommend that you start looking at that as a concept, because besides the interview, that will help you quite a bit as you move on. So that's Otto, and if you want to listen to that again, I'm going to send out the link to the full interview. It's like 50 some minutes long if you want to watch it, because that GLTV is a very, very interesting source for different leaders worldwide. Peter Senge's on it, a lot of other interesting people that you can watch these interviews that are done of some of these people. The same, and some of the people that are in Gallus' book are on that group. So I'll get that out to you. So let's get into then, what the purpose of this is all about. So what I want you to do is, you're going to look at a person, who's a key person that you see within your organization, and you could go outside of your organization. So I said to you, one of our students 2 years ago that I had in this course, she works at the Constitution Center, but she interviewed Chief Ramsey when he was the chief of police in Philadelphia. A very, very interesting interview, and got into some, I would say, got to level 3 with him, which we found very interesting. But the interview then allows you to step into the shoes of that individual. That's the intent. That's the purpose. Now, that's easy to say, to do. Like, it's words there, you can understand it. But it does become difficult because, as I said to you before, you're going to be up against their own downloading about an interview, and also your ability to begin to play around with how to turn off your voice of judgment, particularly as you interview this person, because you know them. So that's the purpose. That's what this is about. Then the process then is as you look at this is that you're going to identify that leader, and you've all ever done that, and gotten that person. And what I want you to do is prepare a list of sample questions that you might want to use. And if you look at that dialogue interview table I've given you, he's got some ideas in there about what the sample questions can be. So start putting that together in your own mind. Now, before you meet the interview, allow for some quiet preparation or silence. I recommend 15 to 20 minutes before you go into the interview. And just, do some deep breathing. Just allow your mind to clear itself of all the clutter that you're dealing with before you go into that interview, whether it be of your job, and just allow some silence to take over in those questions that you're thinking about. You will find that very, very helpful when you go into this. All of my, your colleagues in past courses have said their ability to do that really was very beneficial for them. Now, again, your schedules might not give you the time for 20 minutes or so, but try to get a silent period of time. Then during the interview, you listen with your mind and your heart wide open. You can take notes and ask questions spontaneously. Okay? Do that. If you want to record it, ask them if you can record it, and guarantee them, obviously, it's just you and them, and you're doing it so that you can have your notes. And the reason I feel recording is much better than taking notes, because notes will stop you from listening. So if you can, if a person's willing to record it, and just tell them, hey, this for me, you're not going to see it on the internet, you're not going to do any of that stuff. All right? So that will help you greatly. And then, right after the interview, then take time to reflect on the key insights. Write some stuff down immediately after that interview. Even though you'll record it, just get your impressions, okay? So that's the basic process that you should be using. And then what you're going to do is the principles that are here is really to create transparency and trust about the purpose and the process. Make sure this person understands what this is about. Tell them this is not a typical interview. This is something I'm learning about in class. I find it beneficial, etc. And it will be a different approach to what normally happens. And suspend your voice of judgment. Since you know these people, do not allow that to interfere as you're listening to them. So they might be saying something, you're sitting here, oh yeah, that's a bunch of BS. Don't do that. Stop it. You've got to turn that off. Don't allow that to happen, because it's going to put you into the debate framework. Then access your ignorance. Pay attention to and trust the questions that occur to you. So you're going to have a series of questions that you're going to write out in the beginning, kind of help you formulate what you want to do. But once this thing gets going, you might not have to go back to those. If something emerges from what they're saying, go with it. All right? Be spontaneous. Get to their level. Access your appreciative listening. Thoroughly appreciate and enjoy the story that you hear unfolding. Listen to them. Get into their shoe. Wow, that's interesting, because if you notice, one of the things you're going to see is get them to talk about their childhood, believe it or not. What led you, to become, an educator or a leader here? What was it like when you were a kid? Did you do things like that? Did you play school? I don't know, anything of that nature to get them to look at this. So access your listening from the future field. Focus on the best future possibility. You're trying to understand who this is. You're actually trying to learn from them, from their source of leadership, to help you to dive into your source. And then finally, leverage the power of presence and silence. Don't interrupt a brief moment of silence. Don't do that. If there's a quiet time, just let it percolate. Someone will know when to say something afterwards. Comments, questions so far? So, conducting the interview. Set the space. So what you're going to do is inquire to the person's understanding of the interview and the larger purpose of what it's about. So make sure they understand that this is not a typical one where I'm going to ask you questions about what you do, etc. This is designed to help to kind of create a space so I can understand who you are as a leader. That's something you can say to the individual. Then invite personal history. Let the person talk about his or her life story. Tell me about who you are. And let their, it can start with their childhood. If you notice when Otto talked about the fire, really going back, what that did to him in terms of his pursuits, where it came from. So if you can, see if you can get back that, because this process then can help them to reacquaint themselves with their sense of purpose. Why is that? So play around with that right now. Explore that possibility on how you would do that. All right? And then what you're going to do then is you're going to monitor as you're starting this process is basically, and I'll just let these come up, is, monitor where you're coming from. What's happening to you? Are you allowing voice of judgment? Is this just a talking nice? Are you just giving them, they call them softball questions? Well, we're not worried about whether it's softball or hardball. What we're asking is, where are you, or what's your sense of the space as it starts? And then what you want to do is are we getting, be aware, are we getting to inquiry? Am I learning something about this person that I never knew before? And does the conversation, are there boundaries being collapsed? So again, this is an intellectual abstract framework, but it's a good way of thinking about, what might be going on. So while you're listening to them, you're also getting in tune to yourself at the same time. So monitor your own listening. So what you're going to do is, concluding the interview, seek to understand deeper structures in the system. So the objective of this generative interview is to really begin to see how this person understands their role of leadership within the system. And more importantly, what happens to you in that relationship to this individual as you learn more about their source and you're learning about yourself. Then you leave the door open. Move towards closure by checking to see whether you've given that person an opportunity to fully express. So you ask them, is there something else? Is there something else you feel, that would be important for you to express? And ask permission to, and then, you can ask to come back at a future date to, kind of continue this. Would you want to do this? Some people have found that to happen. Some people have said to me that they have now developed very interesting relationship in a constant talking, over time with the individual because of what opened up through this process. So if that happens, great. If it doesn't, okay, it doesn't either. But these are some of the things that you should be aware of could happen during this interview. Any questions about those two things right there?
Dr. Gould, I actually have I think going back to the slide before, one of the things that I have thought about is the fact that the person that I'm interviewing is my boss's boss.
This one right here?
Yeah. And so while I know I need to get into, I need to get down to level 3, I'm also kind of sensitive to the fact that there may be things that she's not comfortable discussing with me or, I'm aware of the fact that there's a hierarchy here and I kind of need to respect that also at the same time. So
you can bring that up. And you can also set the parameters. Look, this is between, so I can learn from you who you are. But, you also are going to, all of you, make sure that the person, even though if you get permission to tape it, that this is totally confidential. Now, why that's important is when you do your dissertation study, you have to go through IRB. All of the data that is in that collection for your dissertation is encrypted, it's password protected, it's locked, and nobody can see it except you and if in your chair and the individual that the data is coming from. So I think one of the things that you have to assure people is that this is strictly confidential. All the data that I collect once this is done will be, if I tape it, I will destroy it. And, I'll come in your office and I'll destroy it in front of you, if it's there. But you're right. So you see where that goes. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay?
Yep.
So let me go back to the other slide. Any other comments just about, about this process, conducting the interview? Just want to make sure. This all sounds really cool, but I'm telling you, when you get into it, it's going to be a different ball game. Okay, so your attention. So you reflect on what you hear. You record your impressions. What was distinctive about this conversation? And look at that, because I want you to reflect upon this. What was the substantive points that were made? What was coming out? What is this person's source of commitment to the concept around leadership? Because remember, you're interviewing a leader, and you're interviewing a person who you most likely, I'm going to make the assumption that you work for that individual, or they're from a hierarchical point of view might have a higher pay grade than you, or whatever, however you want to look at it. But the point is where you need to. I want you to understand your own attention. And you'll see this in a couple minutes with the sample I'm going to give you. Okay, so that's what you're going to reflect upon. And again, you have a copy of these slides, so you could download them. I do have them under our thing. Now, here's an example. Now, again, someone said, well, I do want to do it as a paper. You can do it as a paper. You can do it as a PowerPoint. You can do it as a audio-video presentation. This is up to you. This person did it through a PowerPoint. So what they did, and obviously I didn't have names in here, but who, what, where, and when. So they interviewed an assistant superintendent, for elementary education in a suburban school district. When it took place in 2015, 8 a.m., the interview was held in the conference room, administrative session. So they set the context of where this was taking place. Now, insights. Here's what they've learned. We don't have to go through all these, but about this person. Promoted from principal. This was a new role. Been in it for 8 months. This is an example. He leads by example. He's quiet. Exceptionally bright and strong opinions. Okay. While at first glance, simply judging a book by its cover, he appears to be very unassuming. However, this could not be further from the truth. So here's the reflection of how this person looks at this. He exudes respect for those in higher position. However, he is first to speak up when he has an idea or believes that a situation may be handled in a better fashion. Continuing on. He leads all the elementary principals, works third largest district, believes that in order to be a successful leader, one needs to be a successful listener. Okay, so that came out. Makes point to visit each of the buildings, etc. Very direct when leading the staff, provides exceptionally clear directions all times. So these are some insights that this person was picking up. Now, here's their reflections. It was really a challenge to move through those levels. My interviewee was very direct and data-driven, so moving through the levels was quite a challenge. So making a statement. So looking at that statement, where do you think a lot of his conversation, at what levels was his conversation? Obviously, now I put it into a mail. And obviously I have his name down there. And so what level do you think he was functioning under? Very direct and data-driven.
Level 2, it seems like.
Yeah, level 2 and maybe even level 1.
Right.
A little bit. Most difficult part of the interview was suspension of voice of judgment. And so my interview with Michael Bolton, because he wasn't playing his instrument that day. Just throw that in. Suspending my voice of judgment had to become a really difficult at times. Still not what I would call easy.
Were they maybe stuck in downloading a little bit?
Who?
The person being interviewed.
Yeah, probably in 2. Because what was happening there is and when I talked to her about it, she said, as I'm listening to them, what kept jumping into my mind was BS. That's not the way it is. Nah, you don't know what you're talking about. That's a voice of judgment. That's level 2 pops in. Remember, that's in her mind. She's debating what she's hearing as opposed to turning it off and just being empathetic and maybe asking questions to go deeper into understanding to get him to a deeper level to why are you so driven by the data and why are you very direct? Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay? So again, it's that process of understanding because, and I practice on multiple occasions, often when the other person did not even realize what I've been doing. So what she was saying is she's been trying to practice this with a lot of other people too, going on and trying this. But when it came to conduct the interview, she really had trouble dealing with him. So yeah, you can say she was downloading her initial perceptions of him and then debating in her own mind about him as opposed to letting it go to try to understand. But what I'm getting you to look at is, this is what I want to get back from you guys. What are your reflections? What are you learning about this, doing this interview process? Because for some people it was a disaster because they felt bad they couldn't get down to that level, but that's okay. Okay, why couldn't you? What was going on in your language that was not allowing for this person or for you to create the space that this person could get to a different level? That's all you're exploring. Now, other people got down there. I've had a couple of people say they felt they were touching level 4. And then I think, let's see, she goes on. Yeah. So one of the things we want you to look at is to access your own ignorance or open mind. So opening my mind and heart through interview was not a difficult step for me. I am a strong believer in approaching all of the interactions with an open mind. So I've learned so much about people and the world around. So yeah, she said what she was learning from this is basically intellectually I was there. When I was in it, however, suspending my voice of judgment while opening my heart and mind allowed me much different perspective. So while she was doing it, she was aware of it, because for her to make the comments, it was kind of like, you're almost schizophrenic when you're doing this. So you're trying to pay attention to what the person is, but you're also listening to what's going on inside your own head. So she's beginning to understand she said to me is that, I'm trying to become much more aware of the voice of judgment, even while I'm trying to open my heart and mind to this. And that she says, accessing your appreciative listening or open heart, this too was an easier step for me than the voice of judgment. She could do it and get there, but as she says, that voice of judgment kept creeping in as I was listening, which is okay. Now she's aware of it. Because as she goes on, as a director of human resources, it's imperative to work as often as possible with open mind and heart. Be prepared. So what she was beginning to see, how that comes into play. So David, going back to your question, one of the things that she said was that it was beginning to impact the way she was interviewing people for positions. As it began to look at this, started changing the dimension of what an interview might be about. But again, as I said to you guys, one of the things I want you to go back to, and I'll find the exact page numbers and I'll email it out. In the Sengi book, there's that toolbox in there. I think it's in the back, towards the back of the book, on how to get to the levels of deeper conversation. And check that out. I'll check it out and get an email out to you guys, because it might be good for you to look at that, because there are these little prompts that can help you to get into deeper level. And then I think in the not necessary revolution, in the schools that learn, I'm pretty sure it's in there. Those toolbox. I'll check both of those and get you the pages so you have them. But here's what this person did. So they gave me a reflection on that. And I think I have another one. Yeah. So how theory you helped me learn to suspend point of view. I read and reread the material on more than one occasion before beginning. It was important to me to practice slowing my own mind and thoughts in order to open my heart. Again, that's why I said to you that time, to kind of clear your mind. At the beginning of this is very important. And yeah, she also says that third bullet point, if I didn't take the time to immerse myself into understanding each step, I would not have made it past first level. So that's why I'm saying to you, look at this stuff, think about it, just keep playing around with it in your head before you jump into this. Don't go into this thing cold, because if you do, like she said, you're not going to get past level 1. So it's important for you to prepare yourselves for this. And then, as she says, I'm determined now to reach that level so that when I approach a situation, I find myself slowing my mind enough to allow it to open and to open my heart. So I can become much more empathetic as I'm listening to people. And as a leader, what you're going to find out is that in order to get this to happen collectively, you have to basically create the space for people themselves to learn how to do this. So again, David, when you were talking before everybody came on, that idea of what you're learning from looking at this, even as it comes to what your integration of the literacy program is, trying to get people to open up, open mind, open heart, don't download. Your role then is to help them to explore the possibilities of how to do this, because if you do, it then allows for that co-development of ideas. Remember, if you look in parts of this where he talks about co-initiating, co-sensing, that the leader then creates the possibility for this to happen with everyone within their department or their organization, etc. Let me see if there was more of this. Yeah, so what did you learn about the process of interviewing? I began case of a hostile work environment on the Thursday that I'm required to interview 82 individual employees on the treatment that they've been encountering. And then what happens is, after interviewing them on Wednesday, I was not sure when I'd be able to use these skills again. And then sure enough, I spent the last 2 days interviewing employees, basically trying to use this stuff. Changed the dimension on how she dealt with this. Again, she's a human resource person. So again, reflection. This is what I want you to do when you answer, the questions about this experience. That again, you can do it as in a written format. You can do it as a PowerPoint. And if you do it as a PowerPoint, what I'd like you to do is put voice into it. You can do it in VoiceThread or any of those, because that way I can hear what you're saying also, as opposed to just reading it. So I strongly suggest that. And also, when you do it that way, or do it as a video, maybe on YouTube or anything like that, what it does is it allows your nuances, your emotions to emerge from what you're doing, as opposed to just static writing. So I'm just suggesting, you don't have to do that. If you're more comfortable writing out, that's fine too. Let me see if I have one more slide today. Yes. So what did you learn about the process of interviewing someone? Obviously, she feels that this is important in her role. So, she's finding it very interesting, very interesting. It's a different way of perceiving. And so, again, the two-pronged purpose of this is, one, for you to develop interviewing skills within your environment, to experience what going down the U is all about, and also to begin to develop a sense of interviewing skills that will be beneficial when you do your research. So talk about that. What are you learning from this process? I want to know about that. I really want to hear what you're thinking about it, because you're all going to come out from a different point of view. But I also like you now to do within your reflective conversations, as you're looking at both the Gallos material and you're also looking at this, is to kind of even practice this within your teams themselves. So, comments, questions? I'm sure you're all ready to go. You got this nailed down, right? And what I like you to do is, again, I hit you with a lot here, which is okay, these processes. If you think of questions, again, just either, email me or text me or whatever as you're looking at these questions. And, you just send it out to me and I'll respond back to you on those. Because I want this to be as valuable of an experience for you. I'm giving you the warning that it's not an easy process. It's pretty simple on paper when you look at it, but just to do it is different because you're interacting with an individual that basically does not have the sense of what you're doing. So that becomes part of your task to create the space for them to feel comfortable and to understand that this is not a traditional interview. Okay? So, if there are no questions, as usual, you may leave the Zoom. I'll be the last person on. And again, as you think through questions, etc., feel free at any time, to...
Pardon me.
Okay.
EDUC 840.
All right, we want to turn that off right now. It comes up a day before. So I'm going to stop my recording.